Hello everybody, Jason here for AxodysFC, and sort of an uneventful Friday. Harry Kane's birthday, the Bayern meeting with Daniel Levy canceled, called off, postponed, apparently still happening Monday maybe. Right now, the no news really. The team is back in London. Yeah, presumably a full week of practice ahead, and then the Shakhtar game, I guess, is the next one, and then they close things out with the one with Barcelona, a chance for another trophy, the Gene Gamper, or yeah, something like that. So yeah, anyway, kind of interesting. Harry Kane's cake, turning 30, and it was sort of seemed like, yeah, I mean, it was kind of a cool little cake, like an homage to the 90s or something. Crazy to me, like someone born a couple years after I graduated from high school is now 30 years old. I mean, yeah, I'm approaching 50 myself, but I don't feel that old as I apparently am. But anyway, the yeah, just not a lot of Tottenham news really at all. On the World Cup front, I had a crazy news and social media fail in terms of I learned that a player that played for Gonzaga, Sophie Braun, who I think was originally from like the Portland area, grew up in the Pacific Northwest, played college soccer at Gonzaga here in Spokane. Anyway, her mom is Argentinian, so she's been playing for the Argentina's national team, and in fact, a starter for them. So anyway, I had no idea even that was the case, and as it turned out, she had a huge role in the recent game against South Africa, where kind of a back and forth game, but South Africa capitalized on some defensive mistakes and got up 2-0 pretty early in the second half, I would say, and pretty much had the game in hand. And then right at about the 73-minute mark or so, Argentina had gotten the ball down around South Africa's goal and had a good opportunity. It kind of bounced back out and then went to Sophia just outside the box, and she just put in a long shot that went in the top seven essentially, and suddenly they're back in the game, and then 5 minutes later they equalize. So pretty neat game, super competitive, and had to be super disheartening for South Africa too, because they had been in complete control of that game otherwise, and looked physically sort of speed wise and just physically a little more dominant than Argentina was. But yeah, anyway, and the thing that occurred to me, so I found out about this via Instagram. Well, way to go, Instagram feed. Like, I subscribe to the Gonzaga Instagram. I'm on Instagram all the time. Somehow it didn't get routed to me, to my notice, that she was going to be playing, and yeah, in the game. And so I found out all this stuff like after the game had been played. Thankfully, thanks to streaming, I can rewatch it. But at the same time, super annoying that I was completely unaware of this. And the thing that occurred to me was this is exactly one of those times where, as Americans in particular, but the whole world, I mean, we miss Grant Wahl and his journalism and his podcast, which he was such a big supporter of, not just men's soccer in America, but equally women's. And so this time of year, we would get so much coverage of things like the Women's World Cup and what's going on. And as Argentina was sort of his adopted second country, he would have been all over having Sophie on the podcast. I would have known about this months in advance, and instead, I'm finding out secondhand after the fact and feeling like I'm usually on top of this kind of thing, and I wasn't. So annoying. And then the other thing is the other podcast that I would call a total football podcast in terms of it gives excellent coverage to men's, women's, all facets of the game, which is the Stadio podcast. They've been taking a much deserved break the last few months after the season ended, because they've been going so strong basically since the pandemic. But at the same time, it left a void in terms of I would be getting their insights and thoughts on the women's game, and they would just be promoting it to people that would be interested at this time of year, but don't follow it as much throughout the year. So that kind of bummed me out too. And the other thing is, the Stadio podcast kind of has, they're on the Ringer network, and so Counterpressed is like the women's football specific podcast on there. And even though they're taking a break right now, they easily could have promoted that podcast, had it put a couple spots in their feed for their regular listeners, and people could have been like, and myself included, been like, yeah, I really should follow Counterpress right now or whatever. And or they could have actually just put a bonus episode, whatever. People do that all the time with that have sort of podcast networks. So it seemed like a real miss, actually, because it doesn't really take anything extra. What kind of animal is in the brush here? So anyway, I fired off a note to Stadio, and they actually were receptive to it. So maybe something will happen in the next week or two. But and actually, it sounded like they plan to have another pod in the near future where they probably would talk about what's been going on. But yeah, and the other thing, I have not watched any of England's games yet, but I need to. And man, seems like they've got the injury bug this year. So I don't know how serious it is, but Kara Walsh left the game with an injury today, and they ended up beating Denmark 1-0, but yeah, that's tough. I hope they're 2-0 in the group, so yeah, and I mean they have a pretty deep squad, so, but you can't keep losing your key players and yeah, do the things you would have hoped coming into the tournament. So yeah, we'll see how things go for them, but I should definitely pull back up some of the streams on Peacock and watch their first couple games, because I'm curious to see how they've been adjusting and who's been stepping up in the absence of players that retired recently or have been out with injury. Beyond that, I'm curious to see how USA bounces back from the draw with the Netherlands. I feel like they should be favored with Portugal, but they're definitely going to have to find some solutions. And maybe, I don't know what Rose Lavelle's fitness is overall, if she really can only go half games still, or if she can go the full game, because I think that makes a huge difference for sure. It's interesting too. Some people have been wanting Julie Ertz to get back to playing that 6 role that she's been so good at, but I don't know. I kind of suspect that it's actually better for her to be playing at center back. But yeah, hopefully they'll have a good showing and advance as expected. But anyway, I think that's about all I've got on the football and soccer note today. So I'm going to call it a wrap, and I will talk to you all soon. So stay well, and remember, to dare is to do.